Michael Devine at AM 1400.
In the name of justice and the American way of life.
With 60 rounds of freedom.
Well, I'll tell you, Mike Owen is here with the Common Good Iowa. It's going to take me a while to get used to that, Mike. You've been on the air with me 10 years talking about
I was with the Iowa Policy Project for 19 years. So
19?
It's going to take me a little while to get used to that, too. But,
well, what prompted this change again?
We just thought that we could be more. This is the Iowa Policy Project and the Child and Family Policy Center in Des Moines have worked together on many issues through the years, and we just thought that we could probably be more effective, more efficient, unite all of our contacts, and expand our expertise that we have across the two organizations, do all these things more effectively as one organization. So that's the thrust of it. So hopefully we will, the proof will be in the pudding, but we're optimistic that it will be a good thing for both previous organizations and the people who have supported them through the years.
Well, let's hope so. That's for sure. Yeah, this is AM 1400 KVFD, the voice of Fort Dodge. Our guest is Mike Owen. I'm the doctor of truth, and he's got to be the doctor of something. We just haven't figured it out yet. So we're talking today about COVID.
Except, I was just listening to your program, to your last guest, and I was excited. I thought, geez, maybe we're going to get to talk about tiff.
We talked tiff to death last week. I'll tell you, I even had Peter Fisher on the line with me. So we got to
have a good discussion.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We've had some really good discussions here in the last week, 10 days. The definition of tiff sometimes gets away from me there. Michael, I don't deal with it every day, and it can be a fairly complex program if you got to relearn it every time, I guess, or if you're not working with it all the time, especially or like the Community Reinvestment Act, which is a great program, but people if they don't understand anything, they get angry and mad about it, and they get very suspicious. So I was talking with Denny Plotz. We have to keep re-explaining it all the time, or people will get suspicious and mad. Some people will go out there and sell suspicion and sell rage. I don't have to tell you that, and I'm a talk show host, and I know all about that. So you have to be ready for that as well. Anyway, Mike, what about COVID here in our state? Other than it's ugly and it's nasty and kills people.
And it's growing, and people are having trouble dealing with it, and there's a lot of mixed views, shall I say, across the public policy arena from state and local officials. A lot of disagreement on how to deal with it. Questions about who should be making the decisions for given communities. I was kind of having a little fun with you offline with the remarks by Ed Podolak deciding that the Big Ten shouldn't be playing football this year, and he was kind of upset about that, I guess. But different people have their views of their responsibilities in these situations, and whether you're talking about football programs or local school districts or universities and businesses, everybody has their view of what their responsibility is here.
Sure.
And this thing was kind of thrust upon us pretty quickly. I mean, you think about it, we're here in early September, and I think people didn't really realize it was upon us certainly till about February at least, if not even later than that, and in Iowa. And it's been difficult for people to deal with. And there are, I think that there are huge public policy implications for this. As we've discussed many times, I think that at our organization, whether it was our previous entity or the current one, we don't say that public policy is always the answer. There are effective and appropriate ways to use public policies, regulations, laws, etc. And there are times where you want to step back And I think that this situation has been kind of putting us all on steroids and trying to figure out how to deal with it. And so that's where we are, and we're seeing that certainly at the national level, at the state level. Today, the reason that we were thinking about talking about this today is that there was a bill in the Senate where the Senate and the House are disagreeing on, surprise, surprise, Democrats in the House and Republicans in the Senate aren't agreeing on this. But the Senate had their bill up today, and it failed to get the necessary 60 votes to proceed. So now we're sitting with Congress continuing to be at an impasse. And this isn't just politics. It isn't just an academic thing. This is going to affect people's lives.
Sure.
And whether you're somebody who has recently lost your job and was getting some enhanced unemployment benefits for a brief time, and that is now uncertain as to when that might change, if it might change. Whether you're somebody getting food assistance who could use the extra help, whether you're somebody who's needing child care because you're working in a low-paying but quote-unquote essential job, but you're having trouble finding child care so that you can go to work. I mean, all these things are linked. All these things are important, and they will have a real strong bearing on how our economy, let alone people's day-to-day lives, proceed moving forward.
I don't think you can lay this all at Donald Trump's feet either. Certainly Trump has stumbled, but the Democrats seem perfectly content to let people suffer through the election. That is inexcusable to my mind.
Well, I
have lost faith.
I don't know what you want to say. The Democrats are content with that, or the Republicans are content with that. What we do know is that the Republicans were in the Senate were not willing to come forward with something to even get people to the negotiating table. And so it's very clear that there will not be, it seems clear anyway, that about 2 months out from the election, we won't have anything between now and then that is any kind of an infusion of stimulus to the economy, unless people change their minds really quickly and get together. But, they have to go home here pretty soon and campaign. So,
well, yeah, that's right. And we have to know, I've said this many times on the air. I probably said it to you a time or two. The Republican Party exists. Please listen to me, ladies and gentlemen. The Republican Party exists to protect privately held large wealth, big time private wealth. That's who funds the Democratic Party. And frankly, the Republican Party both, but they are really manifested in the Republican Party. That is the sole reason, according to the great conservative and Republican political commentator Robert Novak. That is the only reason the Republican Party exists. Now, the Democratic Party was supposed to be a counterweight against that. But I haven't seen it. What I'm complaining about, essentially, is the two-party system. I don't know what we can do about it here in Iowa, but we have to understand that as long as these two are after money and power, because that's what they're after, the people of our state and our country are not going to be served. Now, you can vote blue no matter who, but I'll tell you, in 6 months, your life is not going to have changed that much. And it won't have changed under Trump, frankly. For most people listening to this program right now, that's the truth. And that is what is so frustrating. Unless you have some other insight there, Michael. You know me, I'm the eternal pessimist. I think the glass is always half empty, if not empty.
Oh, I'm kind of the I have a mix of idealism and cynicism in me, coming from my old journalism background. But
yeah,
I do. I think that there are plenty of people on both sides of the aisle who would like to find some solutions on these things, but they don't seem to be the ones pulling the levers at the moment. And
No, they're not, because
and in the meantime, what can we do? We can try to help people see what the reality is. The problem is now that there are so many places. It shouldn't be a problem, but it actually, I think, it actually is. There are so many places they can get their information, and instead of seriously evaluating, all this information, they tend to go to the sources that fits their worldview to begin with, and then anything said by the other side is by definition not something to be considered, and that's not how you get things done. That's not how you learn. I think it's the great radio and TV host Larry King. I think he's one who I remember him saying more than once on programs that he didn't learn anything by talking. He learned by listening to his guests.
See, I've heard that many times, and that's very wise, but I never really absorbed it.
Mike, I think you have you certainly come to the table with your own perspectives, but I've never felt like you were out there trying to set other views down, and you certainly try and test them, but that's your job.
That's my job. That's exactly right.
I appreciate that.
What we're in the constant spin zone now. We're always in the spin dry syndrome. I mean, Bill Clinton had a counterpunching style. It was effective. By counterpunching, I mean every single time the Republicans said something, he would immediately organize a press conference of some kind, maybe not featuring him at the microphone, but somebody. They would respond, the Clinton Democrats would respond to everything the Republicans said, especially if it was critical. And it won in the election. And if you looked at that election on paper, if you remember back in 92, George Bush should have won it. But he didn't take Clinton seriously enough, and Clinton beat him like a drum in the end.
Well, I think that in part of this discussion, we can learn from history. And I know this probably with some folks would not be a popular view, but I would go back to the Great Recession.
Okay.
And not as far back as the Great Depression. I mean, I wasn't around back then.
Me
I
either.
certainly read a lot about it. But in the Great Recession, there was the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
So for short, people called it the Recovery Act or the stimulus program.
Mm-hmm.
And that was that has been derisively commented on by many through the years. And in my mind, the only thing that was wrong with it is that it didn't go farther. It actually was effective as far as it could go. We saw it, and I think it's a real, in some ways, is something we can learn from today. Because what that did is, for example, the federal government provided states with funding to bridge the gap that they were going to have in their own revenues because the economy was south.
Sure.
And when it was used properly, and it was used properly in Iowa, that money was plugged into things like school funding. So instead of seeing big cuts in school funding, things were, they may not have gotten, schools may not have gotten what they would have hoped to have had, but they were kept from taking a huge hit. And it helped bridge those budget gaps. What we're looking at now, and what was a failure of this Senate plan, is that it was not providing, this is just one of the problems with that Senate plan. It was very, very small, and people can say the House plan was too big or whatever, but we certainly needed a lot more, we certainly needed a lot more than what the Senate did. And the Senate was not providing that kind of federal aid to states to bridge these gaps in their budgets that are inevitable and that will tend to when this plays out to result in budget shortfalls that will then mean, unless you're willing to raise taxes, it will mean that you're going to cut critical services that were already challenged in the current, in the ongoing economy before COVID.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people don't realize, or they don't recognize maybe, that Iowa's economy, for example, was not strong going into the COVID situation. We actually had a net loss of jobs in 2019.
We had
Then
a net loss.
COVID came in. We had a net loss of jobs in Iowa in 2019. And that was before COVID hit. So now we've seen much greater losses of jobs now than we did in the Great Recession. And we're going to have to recover from that. Now, is this the economist? I'm not an economist. I never pretend to be. I listen to a lot of them. What they will tell you is that this kind of a recession is not the same thing. It was not, you know, this was partly self-imposed. We can maybe come out of it more quickly. We will see. But the federal government needs to be stepping up and helping the states cope with it because they can't do it on their own. And so whether you're talking about making sure that unemployment benefits are there, making sure the school funding is there, making sure that your health care is covered, making sure that you can do something about child care, you name the services, but if they're funded by the states, they are going to take a hit. And we won't be dealing with it at the state level unless the governor makes across-the-board cuts this fall sometime, which she's not giving any indication that she will. The state won't be dealing with this until the legislature comes back in January.
Yeah.
That's halfway through the budget year. That's going to make those budget cuts even more impactful. They're going to be even tougher to deal with and tougher to make. I don't know if the legislative candidates are out there talking about this, but it's kind of hard for them to go door to door these days in the COVID environment anyway.
Well,
so I don't know.
I do have
some weird time to campaign.
Well, actually, I have a candidate for the State House here in the Fort Dodge area, and he's on at 4:35 this afternoon. What question would you have me ask him?
That would be one of the things. How do you expect to deal with the probability that there will be big revenue reductions that you're going to have to deal with in January? So whether you're talking about, are you talking about finding new revenues? Are you talking about big cuts? Where are they going to be? And by the way, are you talking to your members of Congress and your United States senators right now about how they can help you deal with this in 4 months?
Well, we have a Republican senator here, Tim Kreinbrink. I just love the guy. He's a great, great guy. He does have a tendency to say he's going to deappropriate something.
That's called a cut.
I brought that up to him a couple of times, and he looked annoyed with me, and he just said, "Yeah, it's a cut." So I say, people aren't inhuman. Joe Bokum down in Iowa City, I bump into him every now and then. Good guy.
Sure.
Total liberal, but good guy. And
liberal, but a good guy.
Well, frankly, Mike, and you could pass this around in the People's Republic of Johnson County, but liberals are getting a kind of a subliminal, if you will, impression in my mind and the minds of several others that they're a bunch of bomb throwers and crazy people. So that's I don't know. Nobody's going to sit in that voting booth and say, "Gee, that's right. I really want to be like those crazy people who've been rioting for 100 days in Portland." Anyway, we can talk about this at another time. Mike Owen of Common Good for Iowa, is that it?
Common Good Iowa.
Common Good Iowa. Is there a website?
There will be, but you can still get to both of our websites through the commongoodiowa.org.
All right.
Address.
Mike Owen, thank you. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you.
This is AM. Well, wait a minute. This is AM 1400 KVFD, the voice of Fort Dodge. Sam Clovis, Sudden Sam Clovis is next. It's 3:00.
Hi, this is Leslie Segretti.
And I'm Tom Kreitler, and you can hear the Money Pit every Saturday afternoon from 4 to 6 on the voice of Fort Dodge, AM 1400 KVFD, Fort Dodge.
The president stands his ground. Lisa Brady, Fox News. He's holding a White House news conference before heading to Michigan and again defending his response to the coronavirus pandemic, something Vice President Pence also did today after allegations from an upcoming book that he intentionally misled the public about the risks.
The president made it clear he wanted us to deploy the full resources of the federal government, a whole of America approach, and the progress that we have made, I believe, has literally saved hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives.
Moments ago, the president telling reporters he didn't lie, but believes it was important not to panic. Joe Biden says he did lie to the public and should be kicked